Good morning to all and happy Engineers Day. So now for the today's next
Good
session, we
morning,
are
sir.
having the speaker of the day is Shrikant Bonta sir. Uh, he's been currently working as an associate professor in uh, mechanical engineering department at NIT Karnataka. Before joining NIT Karnataka in June 2013, Uh, he worked as an assistant professor at IIT Patna from 2011 to 2013 and also at Temple University, Philadelphia, USA from for duration 2009 to 2011. Before beginning his academic career, he spent more than 3 years in the industry at Kenmetal, which was located at Pittsburgh, USA, where he led as a product development project, as well as he conducted research in the area of metal cutting. So Dr. Bonta's research interest includes the mechanics and materials issues in the additive manufacturing and laser processing of materials. For his experience and research contribution, Dr. Bonta was invited to serve on the International Scientific Committee of the 11th International Academy for Production Engineering Conference on Modeling of Machining Operations. He is a recipient of the 2010 Outstanding Young Manufacturing Engineer Award from the Society of Manufacturing Engineers, that is a SME. He is also a recipient of the 2009 Young Leader Professional Development Award from the Materials, Minerals and Materials Society and the 2009 American Society of Metals, Indian Institute of Metals visiting lecturer. He was selected to represent TMS in the Emerging Leader Alliance capstone training program at Denver, Colorado in November 2010. He holds 3 patents and he has published several articles in top ranking journals and in the international conference proceedings. In his academics, if you see, he has received the PhD in engineering and MS in mechanical engineer degree from Wright State University, Ohio, USA, and an undergraduate degree in metallurgical engineering from JNTU, Hyderabad, India. So this is what his brief biodata for the today's session, and I hope as if you see his achievements, we would make most use of him today for the session, and will utilize his expertise. So over to you, sir, now. And happy
Okay.
Engineers Day, sir.
Thank you very much. So, good morning to all the participants. I wish you all a very happy Engineers Day. Thank you, Professor
Good
Suryavanshi.
morning, sir. Same to you.
Thank you. So, I wish Professor Suryavanshi for, I thank Professor Suryavanshi and the organizers of this 5-day Atal FDP on 3D printing and design for inviting me to deliver a lecture and for sharing my experience in the area of additive manufacturing or 3D printing. So I thank the organizers and Professor Suryavanshi. So the title of my talk today is Overview of Process Simulation Metal Additive Manufacturing. So I'll begin sharing my screen now. I hope everyone can see the screen.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So the outline of my talk is going to be as follows. I'm going to briefly introduce you to metal additive manufacturing, in particular laser additive manufacturing. I'm going to be brief here because there are going to be other talks in this workshop that will focus on metal additive manufacturing. So I'm going to discuss about two different classes of metal AM process and highlight the key differences between these two categories. Then I'm going to discuss about the complexity of metal additive manufacturing process. See, metal additive manufacturing is where you use a laser or an electron beam as a heat source. If you use a laser as a heat source, you call it as a laser additive manufacturing or LAM process. So I'm going to highlight the complexity of these LAM processes. Then I'll discuss about the need for computational modeling of these LAM processes. Then I'll also highlight upon the challenges that we face when we try to model these processes computationally. Then I'll discuss about analytical modeling followed by thermomechanical finite element modeling. And I'll show you some case studies that illustrate how we have used computational modeling at NITK to understand and gain some insights about the LAMP process. Finally, I'll summarize the talk. So, as you can see here, laser additive manufacturing is a class of additive manufacturing process. You must be aware by now that in additive manufacturing, what we do is we start with a 3D CAD model, slice it into 2D cross-sectional layers, and then use a material addition process to fill the layers to build the part. So, in the case of laser additive manufacturing, which is one of the class of AM process, you start a 3D CAD model, slice into 2D cross-sectional layers, and then use a laser as a heat source to melt the powder and then deposit the material line by line and layer by layer. Now, all the additive manufacturing process, the mechanics is quite similar, and you can consider the mechanics on multiple scales. For example, continuously deposited beads or discrete droplets will lead to the formation of a track of material. You can see on the animation here, you are having a track that's being deposited right now, that's a track. Then multiple deposited tracks or rows lead to the formation of a layer. You can see a layer that's deposited, the first layer, then multiple layers lead to the formation of a complex shape. So the mechanics of AM process, the hierarchy is as follows. You start with a bead, you go to beads, multiple beads lead to a track or row of material, multiple rows lead to a layer of material, and multiple layers lead to the complex shape. So additive manufacturing is basically divided into 7 major classes according to the ASTM classification. I'm only going to focus on 2 classes of AM process, which are essentially also referred to as metal additive manufacturing process. One class is known as powder bed fusion processes, and the second class is known as directed energy deposition process. So I'll only focus on these 2 categories as other speakers are focusing on other classes of AM process. So the first class of process that I'm going to discuss is the powder bed fusion process. So let me play a small video here that shows the powder bed fusion process. So this is also known as when you in powder bed fusion you have 2 categories. So first we start with a CAD model, and you can see the slicing of the CAD model 2D layers and how this CAD model is then printed. So this is the machine, which is also known as a selective laser melting or direct metal laser sintering machine. So here you have the metal powder that's spread on a bed, and a laser scans the powder, it melts it and solidifies the powder. You then lower the platform to spread the next layer of powder, and using a railer or a rake, and that next layer of powder is again scanned by the laser. In this way, you are building the part line by line and layer by layer. You can clearly see here that you are lowering the build platform by equal to layer thickness and raising the powder platform by a layer thickness to spread the next layer of powder. Okay, so in this way you build a part layer by layer. So this process is called powder bed fusion process, and there are 2 categories here. One is if the laser is used as a heat source, you call it as a laser powder bed fusion or LPBF. And there is also one more process where electron beam is used as a heat source. Okay, that's called the E-beam process. I'm going to more focus upon the laser powder bed fusion process. So the second category of process is known as directed energy deposition process. Here what happens here is, instead of spreading the powder on a bed, what we do is we focus a high power laser beam onto a metallic substrate. Then what this laser beam does is it creates a molten pool on the metallic substrate. And once the molten pool is created, what happens is you send powder through nozzles. You can see here the powder is sent through nozzles, and this powder is sent into the molten pool. This powder melts, and the substrate is then moved in X and Y directions. So what happens is the molten puddle, the laser moves to a different location from the molten puddle, and the molten puddle solidifies, and the laser creates a new molten pool. So by moving the substrate in X and Y directions, we create one track of material by the combination of several beads. And by incrementing the laser beam and the powder focusing lens assembly in the positive Z direction, we create the next layer. In this way, we build parts line by line and layer by layer. The main difference between these 2 categories are, in the one that I showed you earlier, you are spreading the powder on a bed and the laser is scanning it. It's called a powder bed fusion. And here, you are not spreading the powder on a bed, you are feeding the powder through nozzles. Therefore, it's called powder fed or directed energy deposition process. Here again, you have 2 categories. One that uses laser as a heat source, and one that uses electron beam as a heat source. I'm going to play a small video to highlight this direct energy deposition process. So there are two techniques. There are different machines that have been developed, and one of them is called the laser etching and stacking. So you can see here the machine. You have a rail system for handling large parts. Then you have a glove box. So this atmosphere inside the machine will be first it will be purged with an inert gas. You can see how the powder is being fed to the nozzle and how the powder interacts with the laser beam and creates a track of material. Okay, so multiple beads of droplets lead to a track of material. Then you have powder hopper being shown. So you can feed either elemental blends or pre-alloyed powders. One advantage of this process is that you can create functionally graded structures. And you can see the laser in action is building the component. You can see the component being fabricated. You can see the deposition of a thin wall geometry using this laser additive manufacturing process. The the molten region, that's red and yellow, shows the location of the laser and the molten. You can see that as one layer is, as the subsequent layers are deposited, the previous layers are heated up and are heated and cooled. So there is a heating and cooling effect that takes place. So this process is being used for repair of components. So this is the second process, which is known as the directed energy deposition process. So some important differences between this process. The directed energy deposition is also known as powder fed process, whereas the powder bed process that I showed earlier is called the powder bed. So in terms of part size, the directed energy deposition or the LDED process is capable of handling larger and heavier components when compared to the powder bed process. Here the part size is limited by the handling system, whereas in the case of the powder bed, the part size is limited by the build chamber. The build chamber volume is generally small. Now, when you look at the powder particle size, a directed energy deposition process uses a larger powder particle size that varies from 50 to 150 microns, whereas in the powder bed fusion process, you go with a very much smaller particle size from 20 to 50 microns. The spot size of the laser beam used is again smaller in the is large in the case of directed energy deposition. It's about 0.5 to 4 mm, and is much smaller in the case of powder bed fusion, which is from 50 to 200 microns. The layer thickness is again much larger in the directed energy deposition from 500 to 1000 microns and much smaller in the powder bed fusion process. One of the big advantages of directed energy deposition process is that you can deposit on an existing 3D surface or an existing part. Whereas in the case of powder bed, since you have to spread the powder on a bed, you need a flat surface or a flat preform. The scan speeds in directed energy deposition are much lower compared to powder bed fusion. They're up to then the maximum scan speed seen today is about 50 millimeter per second, whereas in powder bed fusion you can go up to 1000 mm per second. So there are a couple of important takeaways from this slide. One is that the powder particle size in powder bed fusion is much smaller, then the layer thickness is much smaller, and the scan speeds are much higher when compared to the directed energy deposition or the LDED process. Now, right from the time they were developed in the mid 90s, these techniques, both the laser additive manufacturing techniques, both the laser powder bed fusion and laser directed energy deposition process, they have proved beyond doubt that they can be very useful manufacturing techniques for low volume production, for repairing components, for addition of generic features to detailed elements to generic components, and for fabricating functionally graded materials. However, in spite of all this promise, the widespread commercialization of this process has not taken place due to the challenges related to consistency in build conditions, which is related to the size of the molten pool, residual stress, which causes tolerance loss and decreased reliability, and control of microstructure, which affects the structure. So if you want consistent mechanical properties, you need to control the microstructure. So on the right side, if you see this, if you see the image that is being shown, suppose you want a thin wall geometry as shown is to be fabricated, and because of the inconsistency in build conditions, this is the thin wall that has been fabricated from the directed energy deposition process, and you can see that the surface is extremely rough, and it will definitely require some post-finishing machining operations. So this laser additive manufacturing process, both laser powder bed fusion LPBF and laser directed energy deposition LDED, are very complex in nature. The reason being that in these processes, you have a number of physical phenomena that interact with each other sometimes simultaneously. For example, you have heat transfer. You're using laser or an electron beam as a heat source. So there's a heat transfer. Then there's a fluid flow within the molten pool. The convective flows within the molten pool. Then you have melting. The powder is melted. The powder is solidified. So solidification occurs. There's a phase change. Then you have solid state phase transformations. You have grain growth. You have diffusion. So a multitude of complex physical phenomena interact with each other, thereby making this process very complex. Then several process variations are possible. Say for example, as I've shown you a little earlier, you have different spot sizes, different layer thicknesses, different size of powder particles that are used. So several process variations are possible, and then you can either spread the powder on a bed or you can feed it through nozzles. Then you have several important characteristics of the deposit that we need to understand that I'll be discussing in the next couple of slides. Then the complexity in this process will also arise from the machine parameters as well as the process parameters. The machine parameters we are referring to as the system design parameters, and the process parameters you can have the laser power, what's the power that's used, the spot size of the laser, the scan speed, what is the layer thickness, what is the scan spacing, what is the scan strategy, okay, and what is the substrate at room temperature, or is it preheated to high temperatures to minimize thermal gradients, what is the inert gas flow rate, because you are going to purge the chamber with either argon or nitrogen inert gas. So what is the flow rate? Is there a post deposition heat treatment or hipping operation necessary to reduce residual stress or porosity? And the input materials. So the input material is generally powder. So what is the powder chemistry, the chemical composition? What is the powder particle shape? What is the size and particles? What is the particle size and distribution? Then what is the substrate? Because we are going to deposit this on a substrate in LDD process. So what is the compositional substrate? What is the microstructure and the stress rate? And what inert gas are we using? And what is the flow rate of the inert gas? So all of these process parameters and input materials, they add to the complexity. Now, additionally, the complexity also arises from large number of deposit characteristics that need to be understood. For example, as I said, we need to understand the melt pool because the melt pool controls the build conditions. So you need to understand the melt pool dimensions and shape. Then the residual stress is related to thermal gradients. We want to minimize residual stresses to decrease warping and distortion. Then we also want to look at what is the extent of bonding or lack of fusion. In other words, vice versa. In other words, between the layers that are deposited. In general, you see porosity in this process. The porosity can be because it can be the gas-induced porosity or lack of fusion porosity. Then what is the microstructure that's obtained? What is the macrostructure? Then the crystallographic texture of the components and the chemical composition. Many times the chemical composition of the powder and the chemical composition of the deposited part are going to be different because of the evaporation of the alloying elements. Then what are the structural and chemical gradients that will also cause Marangoni effect in the melt pool. So if you take all these inputs and outputs, you can put them in different categories. As I've shown here, the inputs are coming from the energy source. As I said, energy source can be a laser or an electron beam. So inputs here coming from that energy source can be in terms of what's the power, what's the spot size, what is the profile of the beam, because you have a top hat profile, Gaussian profile, you have a uniform distributed profile, so on. What is the angle of the beam, the pattern, the travel speed, and so on. The inputs are coming from powder. What is the composition, what is the feed rate of the powder, what is the particle size and shape, okay, what is the absorptivity of the laser by the powder particles, and are we using recycled powder or original powder. And the inputs can come from the substrate. So what is the material substrate? Are you preheating the substrate? Okay, what is the deposit pattern? What is the part and temperature, bed temperature, and what is the temperature of the build chamber? What is the build atmosphere? Is it argon, nitrogen, or are you using vacuum as you do an electron beam process? Then in the actual deposition, you need to take care of several different phenomena. Addition of powder, because you're adding powder. Then the molten pool dynamics that happens when the powder is melted, and as it solidifies, there's a lot of molten pool dynamics that occur. Then there's the interaction between the powder and the energy source. It can be laser or electron beam. Then you have melting and solidification, phase change. Then the thermal stress evolution because of the temperature gradients. So all this occurs in the deposition process, and the results that you need to look into it are the deposit geometry, the build conditions, temperature, both the distribution as well as the maximum temperature, residual stress, distortion, what is the surface toughness, as I shown you it earlier, the surface toughness of the deposited components is very high, the microstructure, and what are the properties such as the strength properties, the fatigue properties, so on. And finally, what are the defects, the lack of fusion defects, porosity, cracking, and so on. Okay, so you have inputs coming from number of sources, then you have a large number of deposit characteristics that you understand. All these really increase the complexity of this metal additive manufacturing, or as I'm calling laser additive manufacturing, because we are discussing that the laser is the heat source in the metal additive manufacturing process. Now, one of the most important aspects in metal additive manufacturing process, which is of a serious concern, is the part quality. Now, when you compare additive manufacturing, which has been developed in the last couple of decades, and compare it to conventional manufacturing process, the standards for qualification and certification have not yet been clearly established in additive manufacturing. This is because of the complex combination of machines, materials, processes, and techniques. In the absence of the standards and certification procedures and the absence of reliable database, this reduces the confidence of the OEM, or the original equipment manufacturer, to employ AM for the fabrication of critical components for critical industries, as aerospace or automobile industries or medical industries and so on. Now, one of the big challenges that occurs in additive manufacturing is because of it coming from the multiple length and time scales. I'm going to discuss this in a couple of slides from now. Okay. How do we traditionally qualify the parts? So traditionally, parts are qualified by experimentation. This experimentation can be time consuming and expensive. Sometimes the experimentation to create a reliable database would take several years and would cost millions of dollars. And one of the big challenges in AM is that you have a wide range of machines, okay, the wide source of powder, which can differ in particle size, shape, distribution, composition, and also the process parameters. All of these complicate the qualification procedure. Therefore, computational modeling will play a very important role in the qualification of metallic parts produced by additive manufacturing. And this talk would focus on the need for computational modeling, the challenges in computational modeling, and showing how computational modeling can be used to gain insights into the additive manufacturing process. So one of the primary goals of computational modeling is to change the way how you traditionally optimize the processing parameters. Traditionally, processing parameters are optimized by the trial and error method. And this method used to span a few years and would cost a lot of money, several millions of dollars, to optimize the process parameters for a specific geometry from a specific material. Now, if you're able to model the processes, the advantage is that you'll be able to understand the process physics in a better manner that will enable you to produce parts with consistency in build conditions, lower residual stress, and consistent mechanical properties. And also, a number of times, modeling will enable you to understand the physical phenomena better, and it will also enable you to obtain information that is either difficult to measure experimentally or challenging, such as a maximum temperature, distribution, residual stress, cooling rates, thermal gradients, and so on. So to summarize this, modeling and simulation, you can use it as a tool to understand the effect of process parameters on the quality of deposit in the LAMP processes, and thereby optimize the process parameters using computational modeling and alleviate the need for extensive experimentation. So there are several challenges that you will be seeing in the computational modeling of LAMP process. One of the first challenges is how do we model the addition of material? Because here in additive manufacturing, you are building a part by addition of material or consolidation of material. So how do you model the addition of material? That's one of the first challenges. How do you model the heat input? Now, in the actual process, we have a laser or an electron beam as a heat source. So how do we take into account the heat that is coming from the laser or the electron beam? Now, the heat from this heat source will be dissipated by several mechanisms such as convection, conduction, radiation, evaporation, and so on. How do we accurately account for the heat losses during the building? Then the thermal response causes a mechanical response, which results in stresses and strains exceeding the yield point and resulting in plastic behavior. How do you model accurately the elastoplastic stresses and strains. As I said, in additive manufacturing, the thermal response creates a mechanical response. So how do we couple this thermal and mechanical response in a manageable way? And in many cases, we need to take into account the variation of properties from room temperature to the melting temperature higher, because as we see in AM process, you're melting the material and then it solidifies. So the properties of the material such as thermophysical properties, density, specific heat, thermal conductivity, you need to account them from room temperature to the elevated temperatures. And finally, how do we take into account the multitude of complex physical phenomena that are interacting with each other, such as heat transfer, fluid flow, solidification, diffusion, grain growth, melting, and so on. As I said a little earlier, one of the challenges in additive manufacturing is that they involve multiple length and time scales. What do you mean by this? Let us say the diameter of powder particles. When you talk about the diameter of powder particles, you are anywhere in the range of, say, from 20 to 50 microns in powder bed fusion process to 50 to 150 microns in direct energy deposition process. So I mentioned here as 50 microns for the LDED process. The diameter of the laser beam in LDED process can be anywhere from 0.5 to 2 mm. So you can see the order of difference in the length. The dimensions of the workpiece can be anywhere from few cubic centimeters to few cubic meters. Again, an order of difference of length. And the build time can be anywhere from a few hours to a few weeks. Again, order of difference of time. So for example, this is a data that's obtained from a CRC press release on book on additive manufacturing. It's a handbook where they have shown what is the simulation time, estimated computer time for a simulation where you have a build height of 100 mm, a very small build height with a layer thickness of over 20 microns and 5000 layers. You can see that it took several days with GPU machines. You can see that even the most sophisticated high performance computers are taking significantly high computational time to solve simple AM geometries. So one of the greater challenges for simulation is completing the simulations in useful time. You should be able to complete the simulations in a small fraction of the build time. Thereby, you should be able to optimize the process parameters for a certain build or deposit within a small fraction before the first part is deposited. Now, if the simulation time is too long, if it is taking either weeks or months, then what happens is the industry people, they will question the usefulness of the simulation, because if you're able to deposit parts in weeks and months, and if simulation is taking the same amount of time, the industry will question the usefulness of the simulation, and the expensive method of trial and error approach of optimizing process parameters, which will involve a lot of time and money, will be accepted for optimization of process parameters. The first challenge in the laser additive manufacturing process is how do we add material? Now, if you think of additive manufacturing can be thought of as multi-pass welding. In welding, you are joining two materials, and generally it's about a one row of material. But in AM, you're adding materials. So it's nothing but multi-pass welding. Now, how do you take into account this addition of material? Generally, a technique that's used in welding called the element birth death technique is used to add the addition of material. Now, whenever you're adding material into a model, into a finite element model, essentially what you are doing is you are increasing the number of equations. Now, we cannot add this material once the simulation has started. So essentially, the model has to be created in the pre-processing step itself. Okay, and the model is going to be meshed into elements and nodes. Now, what happens is at the start of the simulation, the elements are deactivated or made dead by multiplying their material properties with the stiffness factors as 10 raised to minus 6. Now, what we are doing, we are essentially making sure that these elements do not contribute to the global system of equations in the finite element system of equations. So essentially, if you see here, the cartoon shows that this is the active elements. The laser is currently at this location. This element is being melted, and this is the newly active element. And these elements are not yet come into interaction with the laser, and they are the inactive elements. So you have three sets of elements: active elements, currently active element, newly activated element, and inactive element. All these are present in the model right from the start of the simulation. All the elements are made inactive initially by multiplying their thermal conductivity and specific heat by a scaling factor that is 10 raised to minus 6. So Sk in the equations that I've written here, it shows the scaling factor. Now, these inactive elements do not contribute to the finite element system of equations. However, they're physically present in the model. So this cartoons here show the elements that are being activated as the heat source is moving. So in the first step, one element is activated. In the second step, two elements are activated. In third step, the next element is activated. So the elements are being activated as the laser is moving and approaching that particular location of the material in the deposit. Now, when we say inactive elements, we are not going to remove them from the model. Okay, we are only simply making them inactive by multiplying their thermophysical properties by a large value such as 10 raised to minus 6, so that they don't contribute to the stiffness matrices. That is called the scaling factor. Now, when we reactivate these elements, when the laser comes over them, we reactivate the element. When we reactivate, what do? We bring the material properties of these elements back to the original values. The original material properties are reassigned. Okay, so that is called the element berthing or activation of elements. Second challenge is, how do we model the heat input? In the laser additive manufacturing process, the heat source is a laser. Now, how do we account for the heat input from the laser? So one of the most commonly used models to account for the heat input from the laser, the laser is generally modeled as a heat source with a Gaussian distribution. So here this equation, F is the applied heat flux, alpha is the laser energy absorption coefficient, Q is the laser power, R is the spot size of the laser, and X and Y are variables which specify the distance from the center of the laser beam. So as you may be aware that the maximum energy will be focused at the center of the laser beam, and as you move from the center to the periphery, the energy intensity decreases. This follows a Gaussian or a top hat profile. There are other heat source models such as a volumetric heat source model where optical penetration depth is also considered, and these have been used in literature in the simulation of lamp processes. One of the important challenges in the computational modeling of laser additive manufacturing is the laser absorption coefficient alpha. This absorption coefficient alpha depends upon several parameters, right from the material which you are processing. Say for example, if you're looking at two materials such as aluminum and titanium, aluminum being highly reflective will have lower absorption coefficient when compared to that of titanium. The absorption coefficient alpha also depends upon the surface roughness of the material, whether any oxide films are present in the material, what is the temperature of the material, the wavelength of the laser. You have Nd:YAG lasers which have different wavelength compared to CO2 lasers, the angle of incidence of the laser beam, the interaction time between the laser and the powder particles, the density, the power density, which can be defined as power divided by scan speed times diameter, the particle size and distribution of the powder particles, and the laser spot size and profile. All these factors affect the laser absorption coefficient alpha, and you can see that this parameter is needed for the computational modeling work, and this parameter is a very complex parameter to obtain experimentally. Now, there are other heat source models that have been used in literature. Now, these heat source models take into account phenomena such as fluid dynamics in the molten pool, which is because now it has been widely established in the simulation of welding and additive manufacturing that convective flows within the melt pool play a very important role in determining the shape of the molten pool. The driving force for these convective forces can be because of the buoyancy or the density differences within the molten pool, or surface tension driven flows, which are also known as the Marangoni effect, okay, or thermocapillary flow. Now, fluid flow and heat transfer, they both are very important in determining the size and shape of the molten pool, as well as the micro and macro structure of the additive manufacturing components. In the early days, the fluid flow is neglected. This is because to include the fluid flow in the computational models, you need to determine additional coefficients such as the temperature coefficient of surface tension, which were not readily available. So these were neglected in the computational models, as well as there were several mathematical difficulties to obtain solution, and hence fluid flow is largely neglected in the AM simulations. The next step is modeling the heat transfer. We all know that in additive manufacturing, multiple beads will lead to a track, multiple tracks to a layer, and multiple layers to a part. So essentially, we are consolidating material to form the part. How are we consolidating material? By using a heat source. Now, what is happening to the energy that comes from the heat source? This energy is taken by the powder. A part of this energy is dissipated by convection and radiation. There is also conduction. So how do we account for this energy loss by convection, conduction, radiation? So that can be energy. You can use the energy balance equation from thermodynamics, and you can express this as QL is QCD plus QCV plus QR, where QL is the heat flux from the heat source, QCD is the heat loss due to conduction, QCV is the heat loss due to convection, and QR is the heat loss due to radiation. Now, it has been widely established in laser additive manufacturing process that the predominant mode of heat loss is conduction through the substrate, which acts as a heat sink, and the heat losses due to radiation and convection are much smaller when compared to the conduction, and in many cases the heat losses due to convection and radiation have been neglected in the computational modeling studies reported in literature. Now, since the heat conduction equation according to Fourier's law is described as follows. So this is the heat conduction equation, the partial derivative. So you can see the equation here. I'm not going to read it out. And K is the thermal conductivity, T is the temperature of the part, Q dot is the rate at which heat is supplied to the system from the heat source, rho is the density of the material, Cp is the specific heat of the material, and T is the interaction time between the material and the heat source. Now, as you're all aware, there is a phase transformation occurring from solid to liquid during heating and from liquid to solid during solidification. In order to account for the phase transformation, the enthalpy change due to the phase transformation needs to be taken into account. This enthalpy change is dH equal to Cp dt. Cp is a specific heat. Now, including the enthalpy change, the heat conduction equation takes this form. Okay. The initial conditions for heat transfer can be expressed as you are defining an initial condition, the initial temperature substrate. The substrate can be room temperature or it can be preheated to minimize the thermal gradients. And the heat losses by convection and radiation are also considered, and from the free surface of the part. So here you can see H is the convective heat transfer coefficient, sigma is the Stephan-Boltzmann constant, epsilon is emissivity, and Q dot S is the rate of heat input from the beam. So this is the equation that we are going to solve. This is a heat conduction equation incorporating the enthalpy change. And this is the initial condition. And this is the boundary condition. Now, one important challenge is how do we couple the thermomechanical behavior? Now, in additive manufacturing, the heat is causing the mechanical response. Okay, so you have a thermomechanical phenomenon that's occurring. The residual stress is evolving because of the temperature. So this thermomechanical phenomena can be broken into two analyses, thermal and mechanical. Now, either they can be conducted simultaneously or they can be conducted sequentially. If they're conducted simultaneously, it's called a coupled analysis. If it's conducted sequentially, it's called an uncoupled analysis. Here it shows, this animation shows a thermal analysis and a mechanical analysis. If it's done simultaneously, it's called coupled. If it's done sequentially, it's called uncoupled. I'm going to explain what I mean by that. Now, in the thermal analysis and mechanical analysis, you have different steps: pre-processing, solution, that is processing, and post-processing. The same thing goes with the mechanical analysis. Again, in the pre-processing, in both the stages, you have geometry, meshing, boundary conditions, loading, material properties. Okay, and the equations that are solved in the thermal analysis and the mechanical analysis are shown here. Now, what happens is when you are solving the coupled analysis, essentially there is an interaction between the temperature and the stress field. That is, the upstream affects the downstream and downstream affects the upstream. That is, temperature affects the mechanical, let me explain this way. When there is a thermal gradient, a residual stress is produced, and this residual stresses, when they exceed the yield point, plaster deformation is caused. This plaster deformation is converted into heat. Now, this heat is used in the calculation of the temperature field. So there is an interaction between the temperature and stress fields in the coupled analysis. So you have to solve the temperature analysis, the thermal analysis, and the mechanical analysis simultaneously. Whereas in the uncoupled analysis, there is no interaction between the temperature and the stress fields. You are doing the thermal analysis first, and then you are recording the temperature, the nodal temperature as a function of time at each node in the model, recording it, saving it as a file, and then inputting that into the mechanical model. This is called uncoupled analysis. Now, uncoupled analysis has been widely reported in literature because it's less complex. You are solving less number of equations at the same time. And even though there is some loss of accuracy, it has been most widely reported in literature compared to coupled analysis. So this is the flowchart for the uncoupled analysis. First, you perform the thermal analysis. You define the initial conditions, boundary conditions, loads, material properties. You save the results from thermal analysis as a job name.rth file, and then at every node in the model, you record the temperature as a function of time, and that is read into structural analysis as a load. And in the structural analysis, the element is again changed. You apply the boundary conditions, loads, and material properties, and then you solve the structural analysis, and the file is called jobname.rst, and you obtain displacements, strains, and stresses. I'm going to discuss now about analytical modeling. So till this point of time, I have discussed about the different classes of LAMP processes, the differences between the two classes, the reason why they're complex in nature, the challenges in computational modeling of these processes. So now I'm going to discuss about analytical modeling. Analytical modeling, as all of you are aware, is a closed form solution that you can obtain mathematically. Okay. So in the early days, when laser additive manufacturing process were developed, people were looking at how can I find out what is the cooling rate when I'm depositing stainless steel 304 or when I'm depositing titanium. They were interested in finding out what are the gradients that will contribute to residual stress. So they went back to literature and found out that the analytical models existing in literature of welding, they can be used for additive manufacturing, because additive manufacturing is nothing but multi-pass welding. So one of the models that was widely used in welding was given in 1946 by a person called Rosenthal, and this is Rosenthal solution. It's called Rosenthal solution. It is a first generation heat source model that is using an analytical method to calculate the thermal history. Now you can see here a thin wall geometry that is shown here, okay, and the dimensions of this thin wall, the length and width, height are such that the geometry can be considered as semi-infinite. The Rosenthal solution makes several assumptions. The first assumption is that the properties of the material are constant. They do not vary with temperature, but in actual physical sense, the properties of the material vary with temperature. The geometry is infinite or semi-infinite. That is, the dimensions of the geometry are such that the melt pool never sees the free edges. Then the heat source is a point heat source, and the rate of heat source, the energy of the heat source remains constant, and the speed of travel of the heat source also remains constant. Now, in 2 dimensions, the Rosenthal solution is given dimensionless form. Dimensionless form is used because you can take large numbers of results and collapse them in an easy to read form. In dimensionless form, Rosenthal solution is given by this equation: T bar equal to e power minus x naught bar k naught times square root of x naught bar square plus z naught bar square. In this equation, k naught is a modified Bessel function of the second kind, order 0, and this is the dimensionless temperature T bar, and these are the dimensionless spatial variables x naught bar and z naught bar, which are defined in terms of the process parameters absorbed laser power alpha q and scanning speed b. So T bar equal to T minus T naught by alpha q by pi kb, where k is the thermal conductivity, which is constant, b is the wall thickness, rho is the density, and c is the specific heat. The thermal conductivity, density, and specific heat are all considered to be constant or temperature independent properties. Okay, T naught is the initial temperature, and T is the temperature at location x naught z naught relative to the moving point heat source. Now, from this equation, we can differentiate this equation with respect to time and obtain an expression for the cooling rate. And this is the expression for the cooling rate, where the dimensionless time is defined as follows. And this equation can again be differentiated to obtain expressions for dimensionless thermal gradients, both in the x direction as well as in the z direction. The dimensionless thermal gradients in x direction is given by this equation, and the z direction is given by this equation. In all these 3 equations, K1 is a modified Bessel function of the second kind, order 1. Now, when you're obtaining dimensionless values, they may not make much sense. So you have to convert the dimensionless values into actual values. And the relationship between dimensionless cooling rate and actual cooling rate is given by this expression. The dimensionless thermal gradient and actual thermal gradient is given by this expression. Now, how do you find out the cooling rates and thermal gradients? When you have a heat source, it's going to create a molten pool. Okay, so we are going to evaluate.
अडकलोय म्हणजे वडिलांचं 1967 पूर्वीचा दाखला ते झालं म्हणजे शाळेत ते करून घेतो ते आता काय करणार म्हणून ते.
Now you have, this is the molten pool, and we are trying to evaluate the coordinates that lie along the boundary of the molten pool. How do you find that? we find out by replacing T bar with Tm bar, where Tm bar is defined as follows, where Tm is the melting temperature of the material. So using that, you find the coordinates that lie along the boundary of the melt pool using the analytical solution that can be solved in MATLAB. Okay. Once you know the coordinates, you can compute the dimensions of the molten pool, you can obtain the temperature, you can obtain the cooling rates, and you can obtain the thermal gradients. Now, using the analytical solution, we have been able to generate what are known as process maps. This process map gives you insights into what happens to cooling rate when the process parameters are changed, what happens to temperature gradient when the process parameters are changed. These process maps are specific for this thin wall geometry. Now, important to understand that these process maps have been generated for constant material properties. Therefore, they can be applied for any material system. Now, here what I'm actually showing is we are plotting dimensionless cooling rate as a function of a relative depth within the melt pool. So 0 is surface of the melt pool, 1 is the bottom of the melt pool, and you are plotting as a function of Tm bar. We have already defined Tm bar in the previous slides. Now, moving along this axis implies you are changing the Tm bar, which implies you are changing the laser power at constant wall thickness. So this map shows that both these maps for cooling rate and for thermal gradient, they show that both cooling rate and thermal gradient, they vary with changes in process parameters such as power or velocity. Okay, cooling rate varies significantly to the depth of the melt pool, whereas thermal gradient can be considered relatively insensitive to depth in the melt pool. The actual cooling rate, it scales with the square of velocity. It's more sensitive to velocity compared to thermal gradient, which scales linearly with velocity. And this is as per the normalization on the axis. Now I'm going to discuss about finite element modeling of the LAMP processes. Now again, as I've shown this slide earlier, the workflow for finite element analysis is as follows. We have to do a thermal and a mechanical analysis either simultaneously or sequentially. So in both the analysis, there are 3 steps: pre-processing, solution, which is also called as processing, and post-processing. So I'm going to briefly discuss about what we are going to define in each step. In the pre-process, so the various steps are, in the pre-processing is, you have to define the geometry of the part that you're building. You have to define the material properties of the material that is being deposited. Now, as I said, these material properties can be as a function of temperature, both thermophysical properties as well as mechanical properties such as elastic modulus, yield strength, and so on. You have to mesh the part. You have to apply the initial conditions such as substrate temperature. You have to apply the boundary conditions such as convection, radiation. You have to apply the loads, the heat flux. So all of this is done in the pre-processing stage. When you come to material properties, for the thermal analysis, you have to define material properties such as density, specific heat, thermal conductivity, and latent heat. And latent heat accounts for the phase change. For the mechanical analysis, you will define properties such as elastic modulus, yield strength, Poisson's ratio, a hardening model, and a coefficient of thermal expansion. Many of these properties are to be defined as a function of temperature. Now, an important step in pre-processing is meshing. As I've discussed earlier, in AM, we are going to use the element birth and death technique to simulate the addition of material. Now, we are all aware that the accuracy of the simulation is determined by the accuracy of the characteristics of the mesh. Okay. The problem is if we go for a very fine mesh that increases the computational time, and AM simulations, because of the multiple length and time scales, already are very time consuming. Therefore, a popular technique that's used in AM is to use a different mesh density in different regions of the model. In the regions corresponding to the heat source with steep thermal gradients, a very fine mesh is used for accurate analysis. And regions away from the heat source, they use a coarse mesh. Now, as you are building layers, when you are depositing the 20th layer, the effect of the thermal temperature in the 10th layer may become less. Less effect may be on the 20th layer. In such a case, the already deposited layers may be meshed with a coarse mesh to reduce the number of elements in the model. So you are essentially going for a meshing scheme which has different mesh densities in different regions of the model, and you're also using an adaptive meshing. So you are meshing based on the location of the heat source. Now, as I said, the already solidified layers can be meshed with a coarse mesh. Okay. So and we're going to use the element birth and death technique to add the material to the and consolidate the part. In the solution stage, we are essentially solving partial differential equations. So essentially, I have shown earlier what is the equation that I want to solve for the heat transfer problem. Now, the physical mechanisms that drive this laser additive manufacturing process are highly nonlinear because of the temperature variation of material properties and latent heat effects. Therefore, we are going to solve nonlinear FEM models where you either use the implicit method or the explicit method for solution. Okay. This is the heat transfer problem that we discussed a little earlier, and this is written in the finite element system of equations as follows. Here, K is the thermal conductivity matrix, C is the specific heat matrix, T is the vector of nodal temperatures, T prime is the time derivative of T, V is the velocity vector which is equal to 0 as mass transport is neglected, and Q is the nodal heat flow vector. Now, once you solve the temperature thermal analysis, you may either have to solve the mechanical problem simultaneously or sequentially. So, when you go for the mechanical problem, we have to replace the thermal element with a structural element, which needs to be able to handle the elastic. It should be an elastic plastic element. Okay. The resulting model will undergo a nonlinear elastic plastic structure analysis, and you have to define temperature dependent material properties as yield strength, thermal expansion coefficient, elastic modulus, and we have to use a hardening model, which can be a bilinear hardening model or a multilinear hardening model. The mechanical problem is defined by this finite element system of equations. Here, KT is the temperature dependent stiffness matrix, FT is the external load vector, FTHT is the temperature load vector. Analysis, the uncoupled analysis, essentially we are going to read the nodal temperatures from thermal analysis into the structural analysis as a load. This animation here shows the finite element simulation of a thin wall geometry using the finite element software package ANSYS. You can clearly see that a single layer is being deposited, single track of material is being deposited in each layer, and multiple layers are being deposited for the thin wall part. So again, you have to remember the mechanics: bead to track, track to layer, layer to part. The next slide shows the finite element simulation of a plate geometry. Here you have multiple rows within each layer. So you have more than one row. In fact, there are about 6 rows in each layer. So now the third layer is being deposited, which also consists of 6 rows. So this shows the building of a part with multiple layers and multiple rows. Once you finish the solution, the next is the post-processing stage, where you can extract a wide variety of information from the finite element models. One information that can be obtained is the dimensions of the melt pool. You can find out the length, width, and depth. As I said, a consistent melt pool is required for consistency in the build conditions. We can find out about the shape of the melt pool, which is influenced by the convective flows within the melt pool. We can find out the maximum temperature. We can find out the distribution of temperature. We can find out the thermal cycling that's undergone by each layer. We can find out the rate of cooling, the cooling rates, which determine the grain size. We can find out thermal gradients, which determine the residual stress, and the cooling rates and thermal gradients together influence the grain morphology. We can determine the thermal stresses and strains. So now I'm going to present some case studies that we have carried out at NITK using computational modeling of laser additive manufacturing process to understand and gain insight into these processes. The first study is using the material system titanium alloy Ti64, which is one of the most widely used aerospace alloys. This work has been published and the publications are mentioned here. I'm going to discuss about the effect of process variables on key deposit characteristics in laser deposited Ti64. Here, what we have done is, I'm showing you the simulation of a thin wall geometry of Ti64, and here you can see the evolution of the melt pool geometry as the number of layers are increasing. You can clearly see that as the number of layers increase, the size of the melt pool increases. This is because when you're depositing the first layer, you have the substrate beneath the layer, which is at room temperature generally, which acts as a heat sink and removes the heat. But as you are depositing subsequent layers, what happens is that the substrate now, the effect of the substrate is decreasing, and therefore the size of the melt pool increases as you increase the number of layers. Now this poses a challenge because, as I said, we need a consistent melt pool to have consistency in build conditions. Therefore, a number of additive manufacturing processes are using real-time feedback control in such a way that as the melt pool size is increased, the process parameters are changed, either power is decreased or scan speed is increased to maintain consistency in the melt pool. Now this slide here shows, this graph here shows the temperature cycling. As I told you, when you're depositing layer number 5, layer number 1, 2, 3, 4 are heated and cooled, So this graph shows the heating and cooling cycles. So I'll focus on the last 4 peaks. So this peak, this blue color peak shows the deposition, the temperature when layer number 10 is being deposited. Okay. So what is happening here is that when layer number 10 is being deposited, this is the temperature profile. Now this is the temperature profile in layer number 10 when layer number 11 is being deposited. You can clearly see that layer number 10 is heated to a temperature above its melting temperature and it cools down. This is the temperature when layer number 12 in layer 10 when layer 12 is being deposited. Here you can see that layer 10 is being heated again, but it is below the melting temperature. And this is the temperature in layer 10 when layer 12 is being deposited. Now the temperature of layer 10 to which it is reheated is decreasing. Okay, so you can see the effect of reheating and cooling, which results in residual stress. And this kind of information is very challenging to obtain experimentally, and hence computational modeling plays a very important role in gaining insights about the thermal cycling that occurs in additive manufacturing process. Now, this here shows an example of residual stress predictions from the finite element models. So we have deposited an actual thin wall geometry and measured the residual stress using X-ray diffraction at a spot along the thin wall, along the build directions. And this is the thin wall geometry simulated using the finite element model. And this is the same spot where the experimental measurement is carried out and the same spot where the modeling results are obtained. You can clearly see that the simulated simulation results and X-ray diffraction values of residual stress for different process parameters. You can see that there is a good agreement between the simulation and experimentally measured results in terms of the distribution, that is the sign of residual stress, as well as the magnitude. Now, as I've shown earlier, we have used analytical solution to obtain process maps for cooling rates and thermal gradients. Now, you may have a question, why do we have to use analytical solution which makes several assumptions regarding the constancy of properties, semi-infinite geometries, constant heat input, and constant travel speed of the laser? The advantage of the analytical solution is that you can obtain a ballpark value of cooling rates and thermal gradients for different materials and different processing conditions within a few minutes. You can run the analytical solution within a few minutes when compared to finite element models, which can take a few days to few weeks, depending upon the complexity. So here, what we have done is we have ran the analytical models, obtained the process maps, and then what we have done is we have used the information from process maps to define a new parameter called solidification rate R, which is the ratio of temperature gradient G to cooling rate. And this solidification rate and cooling rate can be used on what are known as solidification maps, which are available for some materials such as Ti64, Inconel 718 and all. And these maps will enable you to predict whether the grain morphology upon solidification will be columnar, equiaxed or mixed. So the next slide shows the results, comparison results here. So this is a solidification map where we are plotting G, thermal gradient on the y-axis, R, which is the ratio of thermal gradient to cooling rate on the x-axis. So this is from the finite element model results. And now you can see that the map is divided in 3 regions. The first region is fully columnar, you have mixed and fully equiaxed. So this is for different powers at a constant scan speed. Now these results are from the analytical model, the Rosenthal solution. Again, we are plotting, and here this is to increasing depth here. This is the surface of the melt pool and this is the bottom of the melt pool. Okay, and for the same set of process parameters. And this is the experimental result obtained at 370 watt power, which falls within the set of process parameters considered here. And you can see that experimental results are showing a fully columnar morphology. And if you look at the modeling results, it's also showing a fully columnar morphology, that is long and elongated grains as shown in experiments. So the modeling results are in good agreement with experimental observations. Now this shows the results for a high power process where you are using higher powers, somewhere around 5,000 watts to 30,000 watts, or 5 kilowatt to 30 kilowatt. Here again, we are showing this is for plate geometry, because generally we don't use this level of powers for a thin wall geometry. So this is the numerical FEM results, this is the Rosenthal results, and this is experimental observation, which shows a mixed morphology. Here you have a equiax microstructure at the surface, and you have a columnar microstructure through the deposit. So this is showing the possibility of a graded microstructure through the depth of the deposit. And here again, the results are showing that modeling results are showing an equiax microstructure at the surface and a columnar microstructure at the bottom and a mixed morphology in the center. So the results from computational modeling are in good agreement with that obtained from experimental results. Now the second case study that I'm going to present is that we have done in kernel 718, where we have tried to validate our computational models with existing experimental work published in literature. This is from a 2017 paper. So this paper, they have done the laser metal deposition or the laser direct energy deposition process, where they have deposited 10 layers, single track, on top of a substrate, and they have deposited, and we have also simulated the process, and this is our model on the right side, and this is the work from the publication. You can see that these are our predictions for residual stress along the build direction, and these are the predictions from the model published in literature, and you can see that the predictions are good agreement, reasonably good agreement, okay, and the minor variance, the minor differences in variation of magnitude distribution of residual stress can be attributed to the fact that we have neglected fluid flow in our models, whereas the authors have considered fluid flow. Now, neglecting fluid flow can result in over prediction of temperatures and over prediction of cooling rates, and that could be the reason why our models were slightly, the results were slightly different from the ones published in literature. So these are the residual stresses along the build direction. Slide. The next case study is when you are going for a multi-material deposition. So for example, when you are depositing H13 tool steel on a copper substrate, this is in comparison to the results published in literature in 2011. So here we are seeing, this is from publication, you have a copper substrate and you're depositing steel on it. So this is our work, copper and H13 tool steel on top. They use two different scanning strategies. The first is unidirectional, so you go from left to right, and then you have a dwell time, and for the laser to move back from left to right. Okay, so this is the this is the unidirectional. You go from left to right, you have a dwell time of few seconds for the laser to move back to the left, and then again you scan it. This is the alternate scanning strategy, where you go from left to right and then from right to left, and then again left to right, right to left. Now, these are the results published in literature. This is for the temperature in layer 1, and layer 4 is the dashed line, and substrate is the small dashed lines. These are our results. You can clearly see that the results obtained from our computational models are in good agreement with that's already published in the literature. So this shows that the models are giving information that is not only useful to understand the physics that is happening in the process, but also you're able to obtain valuable insights about temperature, residual stress, thermal cycling, cooling rates, thermal gradients. And this is the residual stress at the interface between the copper and H13 steel obtained from the published in the paper, and these are our results for an alternate scanning strategy. Now this next case study shows the simulation for selective laser melting of Ti64. This is for the powder bed fusion process. Okay, as I've shown earlier, powder bed fusion has much smaller beam spot size, much smaller layer thickness, and much smaller powder bed particle size. So you can see here the laser power is from 20 to 80 watts. The scanning speed is 200 millimeter per second, very fast. The laser spot size is 26 microns. The layer thickness is 30 microns, much lower than the DED process. So they have considered 5 layers, and we also done 5 layers in our work. So what they have done is they have presented experimental results for the case of only solid, and for the case where they consider both powder and solid, because if you remember, you have powder on the bed which is solidified, then you have both powder and solid on the same bed, okay, and then experimental results. These are our results from our models. You can see that our results have good agreement with that obtained from their models, indicating that, and this is the chart here shows the percentage error between our results and their results. You can see that the error is within 10% or within 5% in many cases, indicating the usefulness in models to obtain trends and results. This is for the melt pool depth. Okay, again, this is for the only when you consider the blue is for the only solid case, the red is for the solid and powder, and the same is done in our computational models. Again, these are showing good agreement between our predictions and their predictions of depth, and the results are, again, the percentage error is much lower for width case. The last case I'm showing is when we consider fluid flow in the models. As I said earlier, the fluid flow, heat transfer and fluid flow, they affect the shape of the molten pool, and heat transfer and fluid flow, they also affect the dimensions of the molten pool. So what we have done here is we have carried out laser surface melting, where we have used lasers to scan single tracks on the surface of Inconel 625. Okay, these are the deposited tracks. This is the laser source that is controlled by a galvano scanner, as in the powder bed fusion process, and this is the scanning direction. So this is the obtained melt pool cross section in the ZZ plane, and this is the finite element model. This is the Gaussian heat flux that we applied, the scanning direction, and these are the bottom is fixed, the temperature substrate, and you have convection on all the sides, convection and radiation on all the sides. So this results here, this shows the heat source moving from the left to the right, okay, and you can clearly see that the results are showing between experiments and the model with fluid flow and the model without fluid flow. So if you consider the three red color indices here, okay, the first one is the experiment at 500 watts. Then the solid line is with fluid flow, and this is without fluid flow. You can clearly see that the one with fluid flow is in better agreement with the experiments compared to the one without the fluid flow. So incorporating fluid flow becomes very important when you are trying to predict the shape of the molten pool, the maximum temperature, and as well as the residual stresses. As I said, when you neglect fluid flow, you are going to over predict the temperatures, because you are not considering the convective flow in the melt pool. You are going to over predict the cooling rates as well as the thermal gradients. Here shows the prediction of the shape of the molten pool with the fluid flow and without the fluid flow. You can, this on the left side is the macrograph obtained from optical microscope. On the right side, the simulation results. You can clearly see that when you consider fluid flow, the prediction of molten pool shape is much closer when compared to the case when you don't consider fluid flow. You are seeing a different molten pool shape. So the importance of considering fluid flow when you are predicting, when doing the simulations of laser additive manufacturing becomes important. And also, not only that, the reason why fluid flow determines the shape is that depending upon the temperature coefficient of surface tension, the flow can be from the center of the molten pool towards the edge and then downwards back again, or it can be from the edge towards the center, in which case you have heat transfer occurring from the source to the bottom, and you have a deeper and narrow melt pool. Let me explain this once again. If you have a negative temperature coefficient of surface tension, then you're going to have a flow from the center to the edge, then downwards. In that case, you're going to have a fluid flow that's going to be shallow and wide. If you're going to have a positive value of temperature coefficient of surface tension, the flow occurs from the edge toward the center, downwards and up towards center. In such a case, you have a deeper and narrow melt pool. So the importance of considering fluid flow surface tension effect is apparent here from these simulations. So in summary, this laser additive manufacturing process are under consideration for aerospace components, and they offer increases in efficiency and flexibility when compared to conventional manufacturing process. During the deposition of either single track components or multi-track, multi-layer components, a complex thermal history is experienced by the build because of the repeated heating and cooling cycles. Now, this complex thermal history induces residual stress in the component, which is the main source of cracking or delamination or distortion of the components. Now, one of the important challenges is to minimize the residual stresses by control of process parameters, and this can be done through computational modeling that will enable you to arrive at optimum process parameters for minimal residual stress. Not only that, the computational modeling can also be used to understand the process physics, and also be used to understand consistency in build conditions, cooling, and also be used to understand cooling rates and thermal gradients that will determine the microstructure of the material. And as I said earlier, one important aspect that has been neglected predominantly in the computational models of laser additive manufacturing is the incorporation of fluid flow. And our work has shown that fluid flow can increase the complexity of the FEM models or the computational models, but it will provide you with very valuable information regarding the shape of the molten pool. And this concludes my presentation. Any questions? I'll be very happy to answer. Any questions?
Any questions from participants?
Yes, sir. I have a query.
Yes, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Professor Samida from MIT. I just want one question. Which softwares we can use for the melt pool simulation, basically for the powder bed fusion process? Which is better? Which software is better?
See, you can now, particularly for the powder bed fusion process, many of the software companies have come up with a module or a package that will automatically handle the process. For example, ANSYS has something called ANSYS Additive Print. Nastran has something called Simufact Additive. So they have made a commercially available tailor-made package. But we have not used these packages. We have used the commercial software packages ANSYS, and we have used APDL to program, and we have written our own macros and to program the movement of the laser, the addition of material, and include all the complexities and generate the molten pool. So there are two options. Either we can use the software packages available, the commercial ones, or we can use the commercial packages with inbuilt modules. But the inbuilt module is only available for the powder bed fusion process. It's not available for the directed energy deposition process.
Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Hello, sir. I would like to ask how you take care of some defects like warping or shrinkage during.
Yeah, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
So basically, we came across this kind of defect during the when we play with the metals. So I would like to ask about those defects. How you take care of these defects during this process?
See, some of the defects that you see in additive manufacturing are basically delamination, cracking, and these defects can be related to the solidification, rate of solidification that can be understood through cooling rates, or these defects can be attributed to residual stress. Okay, so if you are able to obtain the information regarding cooling rates and thermal gradients, we can go back and correlate that with the rate of solidification. And if you are able to obtain information thermal gradients, that will enable us to relate it to the development of residual stress. Now,
and is there any need to use some thermal pads or cooling pads while doing this process in machine, if we have to take care of the thermal gradient?
One of the ways that people have been trying to minimize the residual stress is to minimize the thermal gradients. And the minimization of thermal gradients can occur by, one way is that you can preheat the substrate. When you preheat the substrate, the difference in temperature between the substrate and the newly deposited layer will be much lower compared to when the substrate is room temperature. And this
we are using powder, no? So how to preheat means I'm not getting.
See, there are different ways. For example, in the laser metal deposition process, some machines are giving you the option of using resistive heaters to preheat the powder bed. Okay. Or in the case of electron beam powder bed fusion process, what you can do is you can defocus the electron beam and use the same electron beam to preheat the powder bed to a high temperature that is about half the melting temperature of the material and then focus the electron beam in the next step to actually melt the powder particles. So either you can use the beam or you can use resistive or inductive heaters.
Okay, all right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions from participants? Okay, so then I hope we will end the session now. So
Sure.
yeah, so it was a very overview about the process related to manufacturing, and I hope we had here the finite element analysis, so which is here for the additive manufacturing.
Yeah.
Know
I
that
thank. Yeah.
not even knowing it actually in a very great session day. So thank you very much, sir. Thank you from the participant as well as from the organization. Thank you very much for your accepting us for the talk and team for the next time. So thank you so much, sir.
Sure. I thank you, Professor Suryavanshi, and I thank all the participants as well as for their time and listening to the talk. And I also thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to share my work in this area of additive manufacturing. And if they have any questions, they can always feel free to write to me. Thank you once again.